Blessings, beloveds. Welcome back. Anastasia, Cosmic Astrologer with you guys. Going to talk to you guys about my perspective on the Saturn ingressing into Aquarius and the Mars, which is transiting in Capricorn at the moment, which will catch up to Saturn and form a conjunction in about a week's time. So Mars is working his way up there. And I want to unpack that clearly relative to what the entire globe is actually experiencing. And there's a few different layers I want to unpack, and I want to show something to you guys that maybe you haven't seen before or you're not aware of relative to what's termed as mundane astrology, which is world astrology. So before I go there, let me just also say that I hope you're all doing well. I hope that you are all keeping safe. I hope that you are all not buying into the fear element of this. And let me be clear, when I say that, I'm not by any means suggesting that people should not be taking the precautions that are being advised very strongly. There are a lot of issues around that. I understand that collectively and individually, and this is all reflected through the astrology, and I'm going to show that to you today. I have been noticing, there's, because of this collective lockdown, as it were, there's a lot of people, including, famous people, musicians, actors, things like that. Everyone's, there's so many layers to this, but I'm impressed actually with some of the content that people are producing relative to their creative skills and so forth, and the overall positive message that is being transmitted into the collective from the point of view of reminding us all that we are all in this together, and there is, in truth, there is only oneness. We are all one, actually. And in fact, it is these dire straits, these circumstances that will bring that home to many people. Because, unfortunately, what is taking place, which is not unfortunate, it's actually fortunate, but unfortunately, the way this collective experience had to come through with this incredible force that it has, and the astrological lineup and correlation mirrors that, in the same way that each soul has their own individual journey unfolding relative to their birth chart, their natal chart, and then the corresponding transits and progressions and so forth that line up throughout the entire life. Well, in that way, the same way, the cosmic energies are also evolving, and the earth is evolving as well. And that's what we need to understand in terms of being able to find true meaning in all of this, as opposed to resonating with anger and fear, which is largely what's being projected. And this is where we have to be very careful with what we allow into our own frequency and vibration, what we tune into, and what we believe. Now, I'm not saying I have all the answers, but I do have some perspectives that I want to share with you today. For me, being in lockdown is business as usual because I work from home. I'm home all the time. It really isn't affecting me. The only way it's affecting me is that I would go to the gym, several times a week. But even that, I actually just can do in my home. And I mean, this is the case for all of us. There's multiple layers in this. Okay, there's the apparent external layer of where we are identifying and feeling the pressure of the restriction, being confined in our own homes. Then there's the crucial matter of people losing employment, which has happened all around the globe. And I understand that that is not an easy thing. You know, people need to feed their families, they need to pay their mortgages, they need to live. I understand all of that. I'm not taking away from the crisis around that. So there's those external sort of material levels. And then there's the levels of our own introspection and our own process of reflection and our own level of understanding of what this means from a bigger picture level, not just for our own individual self and expression and being, but for the world at large. So I was reminded today that, and I've always been, I've mentioned this in previous videos, you know, the word crises, which is what we are undeniably facing collectively today, and for some time this will be going on. The word crisis, when you look at the root meaning from the Chinese language, actually means danger and opportunity. So with crisis comes danger and opportunity, and the danger is evident everywhere, and the opportunity is there as well. What is the opportunity in this collective crisis? It is the opportunity for people to wake up. We have to understand this from a bigger picture level. If we get into our left brain about our personal opinions, we are just going to find ourselves in conflict, opposition, disagreement, and so on and so on. And that can just go around in circles for eternity. But that's not where the answers are. We have to look deeper. We have to go into deeper spaces within ourselves. We have to recognize and understand that the world had gotten to such a level with its insatiable desires around the material and the external, the personality level, the greed, all those things, you know, the slaughtering of the animal kingdoms. There's so many layers to this, but to summarize it, what we're really seeing is we're seeing a world that had gotten so out of touch, so disconnected from soul and spirit and what truly sustains us and what truly is important. And this is a wake-up call for all of us to stop. The whole world has had to stop. And the only way the whole world was going to stop was through extreme forces of this coming through, because we're all granted our own free will. And yes, that's compromised in certain ways relative to the systems in play. I get all that as well. I'm not denying that. But we still have the ability to exercise our will more or less as we choose. And what humanity has done is they've exercised their will from the level of just projecting everything externally and just being driven by greed and power. And it's just gotten to that level where it simply could not go on anymore. It had to take these drastic, devastating experiences to put a stop to the entire world. No one is exempt from this. It doesn't matter how much money you have. It doesn't matter how much status you have. It doesn't matter if you're famous. It doesn't matter who you are. Every single person is facing the exact same situation. So the message really is that the world needs to change in ways that we were not prepared ourselves to facilitate that change. So we're being forced to stop in order to facilitate the change that needs to come. It's like if somebody has a heart attack, and then, you know, they have open heart surgery or something like that, and that's largely due to the lifestyle that a particular individual lived, right? So the person has the heart attack, and then they have the surgery, and then they get out of hospital, and then instead of taking the appropriate measures to create a new way of life, they just go back to their old ways again, right? So some people don't even wake up through that kind of experience. Many do and many don't. Well, we can say that the whole globe, the whole world is having a heart attack in a way, right? That's the seriousness of this situation. I'm not going to talk about I will say one thing about the coronavirus from a health perspective. I'm not going to talk about coronavirus as if I'm a health professional from the point of view of being a doctor, because I'm not. I'm a mental health practitioner. So I work with people's minds, but I don't work with, you know, the physical body from the point of view of diseases and so forth. Okay. So somebody criticized a point I made in my previous video, in the new moon in Aries video, and I just deleted that person's comment and I didn't allow it in the comment section because I didn't think that it was objective. And objective is probably the best word. It was very one-sided, and basically that person was just attacking me for saying that because I indicated that children, young people, are less likely to contract the virus. I said less likely. That's what I said. This person said that I was, giving false information and things like that. My intention is not to give false information. To the contrary. And any comments I have made on that level are simple. And I said this in my previous video. What I am saying is what I have heard. I'm not an expert on this, and my expertise lie in the astrological language and symbolism and understanding of that. And that's where I come from. So whether the virus is affecting young people or not, that's something that we'll see. It seems to be clear that elderly people are the most vulnerable, and people with underlying health matters, ailments, are also somewhat compromised. But at the end of the day, I think that because of this, because of the expansion of this, which is taking place daily, it's so rapid, it's moving very, very fast. It is likely that we will all be exposed to this virus. And the question is not, will we be exposed? The question will be, how well will our body deal with it? Because it is also evident that not everyone dies from this virus if they contract it. So that's all I want to say about that. I'm not a medical expert, so I'm not here to pretend I am. One other thing I want to mention relative to that is, and I don't know how many people are aware of this, but it is my understanding through what experts have communicated, is that this virus is airborne, okay? So a lot of people are under the impression that it needs to be a transmission of saliva in order for it to be activated. But Greg Braden, who's a scientist, and another doctor, I've just forgotten his name, but he's a pretty high-profile doctor in the USA, both these, and others as well, but both these particular individuals have said that this condition, this virus, it can be transmitted in an airborne situation. So that makes it a lot more dangerous, right? Doesn't mean we will die from it, though. I think that's the important thing to be aware of, because if we all have that perspective, which is what I would consider a fear-based perspective, it's going to impact, on how you deal with it if you do contract it. It is. It really is, because we are talking about a flu. It is fundamentally a flu that, attacks the lungs. So the airborne component, I think, is really interesting and scary at the same time, because it is said that if you walk into a space where a person who has the virus was in that space, in the last 3 hours. It has a window of 3 hours. You can walk through that space and you can contract it just by breathing it in. This is what's been said. And I'm not trying to alarm you. I'm just simply presenting what I've heard, okay, from professionals. Now, Greg Braden is a scientist, but he's technically a scientist, but his work is more about working with the scientific knowledge and understanding of the anatomy of the body and the biology of the body, all that sort of stuff from the point of energetic fields and so forth. So he takes it up into a completely different level to what your traditional scientists would. Traditional scientists are ruled by Saturn, okay? And scientists who would work from the level of where Greg Braden works from, that would be more the Uranus level. And we have that division of Saturn-Uranus reflected everywhere in the world with the systems in play, with the trends, with the approaches to things, and so on and so forth. And finally, just one further word I'd like to share about this component of it being airborne. If we relate it to the astrology, it's extraordinary because Saturn in Aquarius really is reflecting humanity, the global human family. Now, Jeffrey Wolf Green in this book here, Uranus, Freedom from the Known, in one section of this book, he clearly states that anatomical correlations to Uranus, one of them, so Uranus and Aquarius, okay, one of them correlates to lungs and the bronchial tubes. So here we have Saturn ingressing into Aquarius, which is affecting the entire human race. And Aquarius Uranus has a direct connection, correlation to the lungs. Now, I think that's a pretty interesting point. So, okay, so relative to the astrology, here's what I want to talk about. And also, Aquarius is an air sign, isn't it? So here we have an airborne virus. Aquarius is an air sign. Connecting to the breath, the airways. Aquarius is ruled by Uranus, or ruled by Saturn, co-ruled by Uranus. So there's more symbolism. The Saturn ingressing into Aquarius and the Mars catching up is probably going to be a big problem collectively, and I'll talk about why that is in a moment. But just a couple of things I want to unpack. So I looked at China's national birth chart, astrological birth chart, and then I also looked at the transits to the entire globe on the 19th of November 2019, 17th of November, I think it is. I'll bring up the chart, you'll see it, which is when we had the first notice of this virus coming through, right, in Wuhan, China, okay? First thing is that China is a Capricorn country. In its birth chart, it has Venus at 29 degrees of Capricorn. It has a Saturn-Pluto conjunction in Leo. So transiting Saturn, which was recently in Aquarius, was conjunct the Venus in Capricorn of China's chart, which just very quickly, one way we could understand that is that the value systems of China just simply have to change. It has to develop a new way of living and existing relative to the high percentage of sales in exotic and wild animals that are slaughtered for the consumption of human beings, the underground black markets where if you can imagine every single beautiful sentient being, species, from turtles to koalas to you name it, they have all been through these markets and sold for the gratification of humans wanting to eat something exotic. That's been going on for a long time. This is not a personal judgment against the Chinese people in general. This is a statement about an observation of certain behaviors that correlate to the slaughter of animals. It is what it is. I can't name it in another way. That's what it is. That's what it has been. So that, and I saw a video this morning that a Chinese guy had actually put together, who I think lives in the US, and was just pointing to these matters of China relative to the black market food industry in terms of wild animals or whatever animal. Doesn't matter what animal it is, it doesn't deserve to be slaughtered at all, ever. So China's chart is truly a reflection of many different things, but certainly what's transpired over the last few months, and more specifically because, and I'll show you this in a moment, when we look at what's called a solar map chart, at the time of the outbreak in Wuhan, China, the line of Saturn and Pluto relative to the globe, because in the same way, when you look at your chart and you're looking at transits to your chart, we can do the same thing for the entire globe. And I'll show you what that looks like in a moment. And that's just showing us, so the whole globe, the entire 360 degrees zodiac is aligned in specific ways relative to each country, right? So the transits then will pass over that 360 degrees zodiac that's placed, if you like, over the globe to see where these lines are. 0 degrees Aries is in UK, London. It's Greenwich Mean Time, which is 0, right? 0 degrees Aries, that line is right up there, just as an example. So the whole zodiac is mapped out over the entire Earth plane. And therefore, the transits at any given moment are reflected through where those lines are placed relative to the Earth plane. And what I noticed was that, and I'll just share my screen and just show you what that looks like, because you may or may not have seen something like this before. Now, just see which one is it. Can't see. Yes, that's the one. Okay, so you may have not seen something like this before, but without going into it too deeply or too technically, you can see, okay, that we have the globe, the planet, right? All the different countries and so forth. So what this is showing us is that the transits for the 17th of November 2019, where they were relative to China. So the transits for China on the 17th of November 2019, that's what this is showing us. So if I wanted to look at the same map but for another country, then I would draw up a transit chart for Greece. And then I would create that into this solar map chart, and that would show me the transits of the day relative to these planetary lines that run all over the globe, and where they are hitting and what they are hitting off. So here's what I want to show you relative to China and relative to when the outbreak occurred. If you see here, okay, so here's China, okay, Beijing, Shanghai, India's over here. So you can see these two lines here, and you can see the symbol of Saturn and Pluto, okay? Now, what you need to understand about these lines, they actually are not just a straight line without any extension. They're actually a band that could run to 100 miles either side of these actual lines. So it extends and it expands. Therefore, where we see this Saturn-Pluto line, just over here where I'm hovering my cursor now, okay, there's Saturn-Pluto, there's the lines. We can see them running straight through China. When? On the 17th of November 2019. I mean, that's pretty telling as to what broke out during that time. It was a Saturn-Pluto situation from the level of the transits that were occurring to China when the outbreak occurred. So there it is there. Plus, as I said, China's chart, their own national horoscope chart, they have a Saturn-Pluto conjunction in their chart, and they are a Capricorn-ruled country. All the correlations are here. And you can, as I said, you can do this with any country, and you can even see, because this is showing us the world, as it were, and we can see the transits of this. But mind you, this particular map is specifically correlating to the country of China, because let me just show you what I mean, so that there's no confusion whatsoever. Okay, so you can see here, what I've done is I've created a transit chart, okay, for the 17th of November 2019 in Wuhan, China, okay. There's the longitude and latitude, and there's the time zone, and I just did it for 12:13 p.m. So then what I do is, this is showing me, okay, so here's all the transits. Look at Pluto and Saturn. They're only 4 degrees apart, okay? This is back in November. So that Saturn-Pluto conjunction was already activated at this time, okay? And it was building. So you can do that for any country. Like, I can create a new chart now, and I can do, I'll just show you so that this can be clear for all of you. So we'll just keep it at that same date, and I'll just put in, I'll put in Boston, Massachusetts, USA, okay? And, okay, so I'm using the same day, the same month, the same year, and this is just showing me the transit chart of Boston, Massachusetts, okay? Now, if I was to show you, now let me just go back to the solar map chart. If you have Solarfire, this is how you create a solar map chart. You go into the tab that says View, you click that, you go down to Solar Maps. Now it's preparing this based on the date and location and time of what I've entered, right? As this is the birth chart overimposed, if you like, over the globe. That's what we're seeing. And as I pointed out to you, when that outbreak occurred in China, there was the Saturn-Pluto line running right through China. Not only China, it was affecting other countries as well. Because remember, I said that there's a band that expands out of these lines, which can be 100 miles either side. Okay, so that would then expand into other locations. Now, if I do this for, what is it, Boston, I said, didn't I? So this is the chart for Boston in the US for the same month, okay? And I could do the same thing. I'd go to solar maps, and this now is putting the transit chart over the entire globe relative to the Boston location. That's the transit chart, right? And you can see that, see the Saturn-Pluto line? It's running in a different direction now. Okay, do you see that? It's if you remember in the other solar map I showed you, the line went from here to the left and it swerved all the way around. It went straight through China. The reason I'm sharing this with you guys is I'm just trying to demonstrate to you that this is a collective crisis. We all know that. But we also know that certain places are being hit much harder than other places. And one of the main reasons, in my opinion, is because of these energy, cosmic astrological energy lines relative to the Earth, and where these lines are lining up at any given moment relative to the 360-degree zodiac that's mapped over the world. Remember I said 0 degrees Aries is right up in Greenwich, UK. That's why it's 0. So this is a very interesting area to research and explore, particularly at a time like this when we are in this undeniable shift in consciousness, but the shift has got to come through the material plane first. It's got to come through the Earth, the material external experience, through every human being with their own level of evolution, understanding with wherever they're at in their life. So on a personal level, and then it's got to come through the entire collective, and then it's got to come through the higher streams, the higher channels, which is all about waking up, shifting consciousness. It's time. There's no more of the world in the way we have lived before. That world is gone. And there may be a lot of people feeling enormous sadness about that, fear, all sorts of things. But what I would like to encourage you to do is to realize that the Earth, she's ascending. And we weren't assisting, well, not all of us have been assisting in this transition. And and I said this at the beginning of this presentation, the only way it was going to happen in the way it needs to happen was for these particular conditions to be put into place. How else are you going to get the whole world to stop in its tracks? There's no way you could get the world even if leaders came out and there was no enforcement. Let's just say that there were some inspiring leaders, even if we just say, well, they were some were from mainstream consensus reality, some were from more of the Uranian level of understanding, Uranian level of reality. Let's just say we had all these people from around the world just give this massive speech one day. And they all stood there and said the same thing and said, you know what? It's gone too far. The personality has just gone too far. Everyone needs to just step back. Everyone needs to pause and everyone needs to stop in order to wake up, because we are shifting in consciousness. How many people on the planet do you think would even A, listen to it, and B, actually do something with that? Pretty much hardly anybody, because the rest of the people that would already have been. So My point is that the only way this shift can take place is through very severe and dramatic conditions that put a stop to the entire world. And yes, that has ripple effects of consequences for every single human being on the planet. But this is what it's come to. And we are all part of it. We have all contributed to it. And there's not one person that can say they haven't. So here we are all in it together. If none of us had contributed to it, then you could say, well, the ones that haven't contributed, they're not subject to this reality that's going on right now. But that's not true. Everyone is. Absolutely everyone. King, queen, it doesn't matter who you are. What is that? Think about that. What's that showing us? It's alarm bells going off saying, stop. You just can't keep going this way anymore. So this is from my opinion, okay, and my understanding, this is what's going on the bigger picture level. Now, in between this perspective and this way of understanding, there are all these levels that correlate to, mainstream media, conspiracy theories, and just those two headings alone, they cover so much in terms of information. And as I said in the new moon in Aries video, with this Neptune in Pisces at the moment, there is this mass hysteria, clearly. There is mass deception on a number of different levels, and it is confusing the masses. It is confusing people about what is really going on, what is really the truth. And it's not about identifying to any one particular conspiracy theory or belief, but just ask these questions yourself and you will get the answers. I mean, look, I posted something that David Icke put together, okay? Now, I on my Facebook, some people gave me a lot of slack for that, because they don't like him, they don't believe him. And then there were others that were, sort of cheering for him, whatever. And this is the world of Gemini, okay? There's always going to be this, everyone's got an opinion. And this is not about our own personal opinion on things. We've got to get out of that way of thinking and activate right brain, Sagittarius, truth, natural law. It's, again, what I was trying to say was that regardless of the current conditions and what is happening as a result of these conditions, what everyone is subject to, financially, relationship-wise, career-wise, travel-wise, we are restricted on every level. Well, this is Saturn in Aquarius. It started with Saturn-Pluto forming the conjunction. That started this whole thing off. And as I've said before, if we go back into history, whenever there has been a Saturn-Pluto conjunction in the heavens, there's always been massive collective crises that have taken place, including World War, including other pandemics, including other viruses, the virus of AIDS, all those things, and many other things that I haven't even spoken about correlate to a Saturn-Pluto conjunction, a collective experience. But we really are at a point at this time-space reality, we have arrived at a point that's so big than anything we have all encountered, or all of us here on the planet, at least at this time, have not encountered this level of global shift and restriction, which is, again, letting us know that we can't deny this. We will rise above this, but there's no way out of it from the point of view of just remaining asleep. People need to wake the fuck up. Sorry, but I had to say that. So let's just talk about a couple of other things relative to the Saturn-Mars conjunction. I'm drinking, and I've been having about 4 or 5 of these a day. I highly recommend it. Ginger, fresh ginger, lemon, warm water, and honey. Some people might not want honey for different reasons, and that's okay. But just if you can just have ginger with warm water or hot water, it's just the most powerful thing for your immune system, actually. So why am I saying this? It's not a trivial thing. It's quite a significant thing because, as I said at the beginning, it's likely not to be the question of will I contract this virus. It's likely to be how will my body deal with it. So if we can strengthen our immune system, strengthen our etheric body, our astral body, our emotional body, our mental body, our physical body, our light body, if we can do conscious work on these layers of our existence, we can be in a much more powerful position if we are to contract this virus. It is up to us, and we have ample opportunity, and this is where the word crisis connects to danger and opportunity. Are we going to just see the danger and identify the danger and stay in that stream? Or are we going to see the opportunities that are presented here as well? And that's up to us individually. Again, it's ironic because in one way we are given free will on that level, aren't we? But a lot of people can't see that. All they can see is the external ramifications and manifestation of this, which is all about the restriction, which is evoking in people, there goes my liberty, there goes my autonomy, I'm a sovereign being, I should have the right to be free, and all these things. And yes, we are all sovereign beings, but have we been exercising our personal will in the last thousands of years in a way that correlates to staying aligned with the soul, staying aligned with the divine, staying aligned with the divine purpose, staying aligned with an open heart, compassion, love, care, consideration, basic things? No, we haven't. That's why we are where we are. And every single person now has the opportunity to examine all these things within them. So I said in the Aries video, new moon video, the extroverts, and I completely understand because I'm fairly extrovert to an extent. I'm sun sign Aries. Being active is an absolutely core, central component of the expression of who I am. So, yeah, I can understand it, but I'm not the sort of person that needs to be out all the time and with people all the time. To the contrary, I'm mostly on my own, except with my little cat Coco, who's just sleeping right behind me on the couch. And I do all my work from home anyway, and I'm very comfortable with my own company. And, I practice meditation daily. So a lot of people are fortunate who are similar to that, that being able to recognize this from the bigger level and the bigger scheme of what the implications are all pointing to, then when you are seeing through that eye, you are able to interpret and find meaning to what's going on in very different ways to what the consensus reality sees. But because there is such an amplification, which is that Jupiter in Capricorn that lined up with Saturn, with Pluto, with Mars, Jupiter is amplification, expansion on whatever it touches. What did it touch? It touched Capricorn when it entered Capricorn. It touched Pluto, Mars, Saturn. So it has expanded these Capricorn elements, components that are in a process, probably in the most, have been in the process of deconstruction since Pluto entered Capricorn in 2008, but from 2008 till now, with this alignment of Saturn in Capricorn, Jupiter in Capricorn, Mars in Capricorn, Pluto in Capricorn, we needed that alignment for things to be the way they are, which it doesn't look great when you look at it just from that external level. It looks terrifying. I'm not denying that that's what it looks like if you only see it through these eyes. The other point is as well, in 2008, which was when we had the global financial crisis, a lot of that was a result of the banks dishing out, thousands, hundreds and thousands and millions of dollars to people to buy homes, and none of them could pay the money back. So there was this massive situation relative to people's homes where houses were being sold for $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, $6,000, something ridiculous like that. That's how the global crisis affected the financial structure of things back then, right? And why is that significant? It's significant because Pluto ingressing into Capricorn brings in its polarity Cancer. What's Cancer connect to? Home, your house. So here again, with the collective global crisis that's going on at the moment with Pluto in Capricorn, its polarity point is Cancer. And where does everybody have to remain? In their home. Well, Pluto deconstructs this reality. So Saturn going into Aquarius, which is going to be there for 3 years, which is also showing us that regardless of whether they find a cure, vaccine in the next 6 months or the next 12 months or the next 18 months, for the at least next 3 years, we are still going to be in a place of severe transition, which is going to include having to have a different attitude, a different perspective, a different approach, a different way of life. And that's not going to settle in like a beautiful flower in a pot plant. That there's going to be a lot of bumps, there's going to be a lot of pain, there's going to be a lot of different things that are going to happen for the transition to start to set in to take us to that next level. And one of the main reasons for the challenges that we are looking at before us over the next 3 years, more or less, could be more, is that there are still a lot of people on the planet that are very much consensus reality, and that is not a criticism and that is not a judgment, it's just an observation. I don't have that position where when I see somebody living their life purely from the consensus reality, that I make a judgment in a harsh way about them. I just have the understanding that we all are evolving at a different level, individually and then collectively. So to make a judgment about somebody else it's kind of irrelevant and futile, and it certainly doesn't help wake people up. What can help wake people up is to teach by example. So where was I? I lost my the Saturn. So the Saturn in Aquarius, for a start, correlates to the restrictions that are felt and experienced throughout the entire human race, because Aquarius is the sign that connects to the entire human race. Saturn is the body that correlates to restriction, amongst many other things. Mars catching up is starting to, because Mars technically is conjunct Saturn still, even though it's in the sign of Capricorn, because Saturn is, I think it's still at 0 degrees of Aquarius. So first of all, Saturn and Mars have already been, well, let's just get the chart up, and that might just give us a bit of a visual. So let's go to today's chart, 25th of March. So let's just play around with this. Let me just go back a few days. So, okay. Yes, that's right. So technically Mars did not catch up to be in an exact conjunction with Saturn from a technical perspective. You can see here I've gone back to the 11th of March and look at Mars. It's at 16 of Capricorn, right? And Saturn is at 29. So if I step the chart forward and just go through the days moving forward. So 14th of March, Mars is at 18 of Capricorn. Okay. And we can just keep going. Now, this is the 22nd of March, and this is the not long after, a couple of hours later, Saturn ingressed into Aquarius. Okay, so what happened was Mars didn't actually technically catch up to being in an exact conjunction with Saturn. That's significant because I think if it had some of the things we're seeing now would have probably been even worse, especially if we have a conjunction with Mars and Saturn twice in the space of a couple of weeks in different signs. So having the conjunction with Mars and Saturn in Capricorn, which it didn't happen technically, and then having it again in the sign of Aquarius. It's a double dose of the two malefics. That's really hardcore. So, but still, we can see that Mars is still conjunct Saturn. Okay, it just didn't get to the point to be exactly conjuncted. So the next day, 23rd of March, you can see Saturn's at 0 of Aquarius. Okay. Now let's go back to the 25th, which is today for me, or for anyone in the Southern Hemisphere. And so what we're seeing and have been seeing over the last week or so is that the build-up of Mars-Saturn catching up together, two malefics. And so this build-up is current, it's present, and it's going to progress each day that goes by, which is another reason why on a daily basis there is new levels of restriction kicking in. And when Mars gets to 0 degrees of Aquarius, it is conjunct Saturn at 0 degrees of Aquarius. That's quite critical. 0 degrees. That's critical. It's like urgency, urgent, critical. And so this is where we see Mars and Saturn finally coming together, which is at the end of this month. And as we, and so there's going to be, I think there's going to be a lot more enforcement that's going to come through. Could be a couple of days before this, it could be right on this day, but there's certainly going to be a stronger build-up. And at the same time, there's going to be this incredible resistance from humanity as well. And this is it's, you could say it in a couple of different ways. On one hand, because Aquarius correlates to freedom, and then Mars and Saturn correlates to the tension and blockage of being able to use our will, Mars, our ability to feel independent and free, is being collectively in Aquarius, Mars, Saturn in Aquarius, humanity. So what we're feeling now is going to get worse, is what I'm trying to say. But again, if you heard anything that I said in the last 40 minutes or so relative to our own personal perspective and position, we don't have to subscribe to the consensus reality experience of it with just that limited view. Because if we do, then, you know, it just looks like, well, what's the point? You know, this is just disastrous. It's just it's wrong. It's, you know, all the negative filter becomes expanded, right? So we have to employ our right brain to be able to see the bigger picture. And you know what? You don't even have to be a spiritually inclined person really to see the bigger picture. You can just look at it from the level of, have a look at the state of the world, the way it's been operating. Even from a logical perspective, you should be inclined to understand that raping the earth of her resources, slaughtering the animal kingdom, being driven just by greed and external validation and praise and all that sort of stuff. We need to recognize that we're so out of balance. So yeah, so as Mars and Saturn get closer, which they become exact on the 31st of March, I think what we'll see is, well, first of all, there's already martial law implemented in certain countries around the globe. We don't have that in Australia, but we might, who knows? I know they have it, and please correct me if I'm wrong, you guys, because I'm just going on what I've heard, you know, through the media and just through people posting things on social media and so forth. But it is my understanding that there is martial law in place in certain states in the US. It's happening in certain places in Europe as well. So if you are in any of those locations, I'd like to hear from you relative to if that is happening, and what's the feel of that? What's the feeling of that? What's going on, you know, for all of you there relative to that? And so that the Mars Saturn catching up to each other is just going to, it's going to hit a chord that's a lot more sensitive than what's being hit at the moment. And Mars Saturn traditionally are known as the two malefics. And a Mars Saturn conjunction is by no means an easy aspect, whether you have it in your own birth chart or whether it's happening as a collective experience. And it does impose on our will. But on the other hand, it is also about recognizing that we need to exercise our will in a disciplined way. That's sort of the positive takeaway of a Mars-Saturn conjunction. We can employ discipline into our will in ways that perhaps we haven't before, actually, and that's likely to be the case for every single one of us, because I don't think any of us on the planet have ever faced a situation like this before. So we're looking at that energy of, it's a new phase, new conjunction, it's at 0 degrees, which is critical, it's new birthing, it's in Aquarius, meaning it's going to affect the entire human family on the globe, and we are dealing with further enforced restrictions that will feel very difficult to manage, because it will feel like more of our freedom has been taken away. Mars in Aquarius is about, expressing your will in a free capacity. But we still have the energy of Aquarius present. So on another level, that then speaks to the process of individuation. So we are being asked to wake up in the biggest way that we have ever been asked as far as this lifetime is concerned. Waking up means getting in touch with Uranus, waking up, individuating. The consensus reality, the way it has been, can no longer continue. So the Aquarian component in this highlights that, our own personal journey of individuation through this, becoming more authentic. This is an important point, because becoming authentic, which is in a nutshell what individuation is about, individuation connecting to the planet Uranus, this is forcing us to step back and to really look at every single thing about ourself and our life. It's causing us to reevaluate Uranus in Taurus, to reevaluate our whole value system, individually and collectively. And also, as we move forward beyond the 31st of March, so let me just take it to, yeah, okay. So I've got a chart for the 7th of April now on the screen, and we can go even a little bit further, or for those that are really pedantic about orb, they may make it less. So give or take a day or two around this date, what we're looking at is yeah, that's right. So sorry, I'm just thinking, and yeah. So on the 7th of April, and as we're building towards the 7th of April, but certainly around the 6th, 7th, 8th of April, 9th, around there, what we're going to have in the heavens is a very important midpoint. And the midpoint is with Pluto, Saturn, and Mars. So what does that mean? Well, it's not a pretty picture, if I'm going to be perfectly honest. It's a very difficult midpoint, okay? And we're talking about Mars, Saturn, two malefics, and we're talking about Pluto, which, yes, it correlates to the soul and evolution, but in a mundane consensus sort of reality, it correlates to destruction and death, right? But just a point here with the Mars Saturn energy. Here are some perspectives, okay? And this comes from a book that is all about midpoints. And it's by Reinhold Everton, and it's the combination of stellar influences. Now, I warn you, if you get this book, you have to be pretty advanced in astrology to understand what this is about, number one. Number two, if you haven't heard of this book before, but you know, you've heard a little bit about midpoints or whatever, understand that the person who wrote this book was German and was living in a time where things were quite bleak. So his outlook on the more challenging aspects and midpoints and planetary energies is quite bleak. Okay, he doesn't see it from that transcendent level. Okay, so you just have to kind of be prepared for that, right? It's not a happy book to read, unless of course you read things about Venus, Jupiter, the two benefics, right? But anyway, look, he says about Mars Saturn energy. Okay, and this is very, as I said, kind of bleak in a way, but very sort of hardcore, real kind of messages, right? So the principle of Mars Saturn energy is harmful or destructive energy, inhibited or destroyed vitality. I told you it's it's pretty bleak. The psychological correspondence, however, is endurance, the power of resistance, okay, forget about that word. That's the positive psychological correspondence. It connects to endurance and the power of resistance, right? And that's where the whole thing about discipline comes in. You know, a Mars Saturn energy is really powerful to employ discipline, to work really hard on something. And without question, we all have to work really hard at everything in our lives at the moment. Everything. But the point being that we can tap into and employ the level of this that correlates to discipline, which is what we need. We, even just from the simplest levels, we need discipline to remember to wash our hands, you know, to with all the measures and precautions in place and all the things that we are being forced or encouraged to do. It requires discipline, doesn't it? Because a lot of what's going on at the moment, if not all of it, is not our normal way of living. It doesn't come automatically. So we have to be conscious and bring some discipline into it to be able to work through this. So this is where we can get a positive expression of, if we were to get a positive expression of Mars Saturn, that's what it would be. And don't underestimate the power of that, because it's very powerful, okay? However, the negative psychological correspondence to this particular planetary combination is concentrated energy, either outwardly expressed as violence or inwardly shown as destructive power. Hardness, harshness, or bitterness, wildness, willed obstinacy. So what you're hearing is destruction, anger, restriction on will, and so forth, right? The demonstration of one's own interest in any enterprise or activity lasts only such time as is required for overcoming the main difficulties. The tendency to get hurt or injured, mostly destructive or pernicious forms of energy. The biological correspondence, so it has a few layers to it. It's really bleak, the biological correspondence. I'm not even going to read that. The sociological correspondence, which is extremely important because this is a globally collective, social collective crisis, obviously. So the sociological correspondence is really significant at this point, right? So it's manual laborer, miners. So that's just talking actually about specific professions that would actually be described by Saturn-Pluto conjunction. And then he says, energetic people who are able to overcome the greatest difficulties. So he's associating that to a sociological correspondence. And that's actually very, very encouraging, because that's telling us that if we can work with this vibration through consciousness and unison, we can actually overcome the most difficult situations. And that's exactly what we're going to need to do, aren't we? Really. And then he just says that, on another level, probable manifestations, he just talks about tests of strength, pardon me, disputes, separations, illnesses, cases of death. So more bleak content, but probably very apt given the global conditions, right? So you just, yeah, it's good to be aware, and that's what giving this information is about: creating awareness, not fear. Awareness is power. It's powerful, just like knowledge is power. When you have awareness and insight and understanding, you are better placed to see the bigger picture and to find the meaning in what's going on, rather than looking for the blame, projecting the blame, the anger, left brain, looking for all the wrongs and so on and so forth. That can just endlessly go on, which is the function of the left brain. It is the function of the left brain to identify and connect the dots to everything that it is processing or seeing. But Gemini doesn't have that capacity to step above and beyond that, which is why its opposite sign is Sagittarius, because it is Sagittarius that takes us to the bigger right brain, intuition, view, and understanding. Now, I just want to see what he says about Pluto Mars equals Saturn. Let's see, because that's the midpoint. That I am saying that around these days, next month in April, we have this collective transit, cosmological transit of Pluto, Saturn at the midpoint, Mars on the other end. Putting those three bodies together in the hands of an unconscious individual is a signature for perhaps some of the darkest things that you will ever encounter. So it is inherently an incredibly difficult energy, but it also has the ability for rebirth, regeneration, and transformation, because Pluto, that's what Pluto ultimately can bring, and usually, well, whether we like it or not, does. Okay, so what is it? Pluto, Mars, Pluto. I'm pleasantly surprised, and so will you guys be. So he's actually saying that this midpoint of Pluto, Mars, with Saturn at the midpoint of those two planetary energies, it's actually quite promising. It's quite good. He says, a person unafraid of hard work, leaving no stone unturned in the pursuit of a particular task, the desire to overcome difficulties and obstacles at all cost. So perhaps that will be on a collective level. It certainly has the potential, we could say, to promote a stronger sense of willingness to do the right thing, to do what we need to do for this shift that we are all experiencing and for the transition that is required. Perhaps those days in April, the first week of April, thereabouts, that there is a space that opens up where we can be really more determined, unafraid, leaving no stone unturned, the desire to overcome difficulties and obstacles. So it's pretty positive, actually. So the Mars Saturn, I think, it is going to stir up a lot in the collective unconscious over the next sorry guys, I just want to, these lights sometimes are just really, they do my head in. So the signature of Mars Saturn has quite a few layers, as I've just explained to you, and it's just going to come down to how the collective responds to this vibration, because there are a number of possibilities and there are lots of positive ones as well. But if the majority see this as a violation of their freedom and sovereignty, and they just see it from that level only and just subscribe to conspiracy theories and that's it, then it's likely to create anarchy and just collective anger, which is not going to help any of us, in my opinion. I saw last night actually some footage. My brother sent this to me. I think it was in Spain. So if any of you are in Spain and you saw this or are aware of it, can you please tell me if I'm correct in suggesting that it's in Spain? I'm not saying it was. I'm saying I think it was. It was just a scene. It was streamed live. This is just to demonstrate what can happen with Saturn Mars, okay? It was like a big department store that had clothes, furniture, toilet paper. I'm sure I saw somebody carrying toilet paper. Just a number of different things, massive department store. And there were hundreds and hundreds of people frantically running in and out, grabbing things, but they had smashed all the glass windows and doors. So it was nighttime, so it looked like this department store was closed, but people had just gone and smashed all the windows and doors, and they were just taking whatever they wanted. And I'm not making a judgment on that. I'm just stating what I saw. And I noticed that there were police presence there, not many, but they weren't doing anything to the people or the situation. Now, I don't know what exactly that was about, and I'm not 100% certain it was in Spain. I think it was, and I don't know what happened thereafter. But all I'm saying is that that kind of situation is what can potentially break out everywhere on the globe with this Saturn-Mars conjunction if it gets out of control. And whilst some people might see a benefit in that or might see that as a good thing, I don't know, it is also a reflection of hysteria, fear, panic, And also, if this virus spreads as easily as it does, as they say it does, then those sorts of situations are clearly putting more people at risk, and the transmission is just booming rapidly, right? So there cannot be a good result from that. We have to think about this from the point of view of the trajectory moving into the future. The world is going to look very different. There's no question. I'm sure all of you realize that, feel that, see that. There's no question. Everyone has a different, perhaps, perspective of what that might look like. And in truth, there's so much of that we actually really don't know. We really don't know. There's a lot of unanswered questions at the moment. And all I've done today is try to demonstrate by observation and correlation the global events and conditions relative to the astrological alignment of things, and how it literally is all there. There's no doubt about it. On every level it's there, even in terms of where this virus allegedly was born, which was China. I showed you the solar map chart, right? So, and just finally, and I've kind of said this in one way or another, but just finally, this is the physical correlation and observation that I've pointed to is just to help us understand, first of all, the power of astrology, the symbolism, to understand the symbols, right? And it's undeniable, but outside of that, the primary message here is that the world was not going to do what it needs to do to transition on its own. So it just had to come through enforcement. There's going to be a lot of people that are going to argue what I just said and debate it and maybe criticize me for it and whatever. And I don't care. I actually don't. I'm saying what I personally feel and what I can see from an astrological correlation and what I can sense intuitively as well. I do give credit to people like David Icke and certain other people. I'm not saying I agree with every single thing they say, but I have a very open mind. And look, when David Icke talks about the levels of injustice, the corruption and the criminal activity and the control and the imposition and restrictions on people's lives, not just from what's happening at the moment, but what's been going on forever, really. That is undeniably true. And this is another reason why we have to transition, so that we can actually reclaim also our own sense of sovereignty and freedom, because in one way we've had that, but in a large way we really haven't. So I feel that these transitions are going to speak to that as well in the trajectory moving forward, even though it probably doesn't look like that right now for many people perhaps. But I feel that it will, because ultimately I have unquestionable, undeniable trust and inner knowing of the divine plan. And I don't care how many people on the planet, Satanism, satanics, the elites, the whatevers, right? They cannot be equated to the vibration and the power of divine source creation to all things. And everything happens in the way that it's supposed to happen as well, collectively and personally. So, got some lavender oil here too. Yeah, those are my reflections, and I'll have more. I'll have more to say. What I've shared with you today, I've basically been processing, not writing notes, not whatever, just processing and thinking about pretty much over the last 3 days, quite intensely within my own self. And so what I've shared with you today is just an encapsulation of what I've been feeling and processing inside my own self relative to the astrological signatures, symbolism, and correlations, and just my own sense about things as well. So I'm not saying I'm right, I'm not saying I'm wrong, I'm saying this is my perspective based on my astrological understanding and my own personal intuition. I hope that you can take away some positive things out of this, and I hope that it can inspire in some way to alleviate perhaps some of the anxiety and tension and stress, because we will get through this and we will be stronger for it. And most importantly, we will have to wake up, and we will have to become more conscious. Not everyone's going to reach the same level of consciousness, but is everybody going to have to confront that to some capacity in some way? Yeah, they are, all of us. So that's where it's at. I'll be back with more as I continue to process and observe. I mentioned this in my last video, and I'll just mention it again. I'm offering like 30-minute sessions for people, or 45-minute sessions, due to what's happening, and that can include counselling. That can include. I'm very open. A full chart reading is a. I'm still doing those, and I'm still doing forecast readings. I'm still doing all the different readings that I've always been doing, but I'm just opening up a space for people to have a personal session with me in how they feel they need that time to be explored for their own self. And I'm open to discussing what that is for you, what your needs are, what that looks like for you, what would be beneficial for you at the moment. So that could include looking at just some really major transits, for the next what's really hitting your chart at the moment, and just having a chat about that for about a 30-minute session. And that's I'm doing that as well because some people will be in a lot of people, are likely to be and already are in financial hardship. So finances are extremely challenging for people at the moment. So this is another reason why I'm opening up a space it's a shorter time. It's a lot less than what a complete session and reading with me would be. And I'm giving my time in that way as my offering of service at the moment with what's happening. Yeah. So just breathe, be present, feel it from inside you, ask the questions deep inside. Step out of the left brain. Trust in the divine process. Connect with your higher self, soul, heart center. Take the appropriate precautions. Look after your health. And I'll see you guys very, very soon. Sending you all so much love and so much blessings. And yeah, we're not separate from each other. None of us are. And this is the proof in the pudding right here, right now, everything that's going on. Bye for now.